First of all, I would like to welcome you all to this Family Education Trust conference, the first and hopefully not the last at this particular venue. If you don't know why I make that comment, then it will become clear as time goes on today. My name is Stephen Balogh, and I'm the chair of Family Education Trust. You'll have the opportunity to meet all of us involved in the FET if you haven't done so already in the course of the day, and we look forward to meeting and talking to you, whether you are old hands or fresh faces. So I'm aware that a number of you have been faithfully coming to FET conferences, some of you for decades, while others you're just coming to have a look-see for the first time. But whether you are new or old to this, let's take a moment now to think about why we are here as Family Education Trust, beyond just having a jolly good time together, which is always a good reason as well. I'm actually quite new to FET. It was just 2 years ago that I attended my first FET conference. My motivation at the time for doing so was in truth a little frivolous, an opportunity to renew a long-standing but latterly sparse acquaintance with Professor David Peyton, one of FET's professional advisors, with whom I'd been at school in St Albans back in the day. At that conference, knowing little then of FET and nothing of the turmoil it had been going through, I was immediately struck by three things. Firstly, as an organisation of sincerity. I'm old enough to have studied Latin at school, indeed with David, and one of my favourite inheritances from that is the word sincere, coming from the Latin sine cera, some of you may know that, which literally means without wax. In brief, in Roman times, dishonest potters would use wax as a cheap shortcut, whose result was pots that obviously wouldn't stand the test of time. Inscribing a pot with sine cera, without wax, was therefore a sort of early kite mark of quality. So, sincerity as a kite mark of quality. Secondly, as an organisation of intent, the seriousness of the assault on the family, on its structure and composition, its members and the relationships between them, indeed the deadly seriousness of that assault demands an equally strong response. There is no point having a wax-free, robust pot if it's not going to be put to use. FET has throughout its 5 and more decades shown its intent to identify, to describe, to highlight, and to counter the hydra of progressive and other pernicious ideas that would debase and displace the family from the heart of society, replacing it with an ersatz substitute, or, in the extreme, with nothing at all. Thirdly, as an organisation of humanity and warmth and generosity of spirit, and humour. 2 years ago, I experienced for myself the deep commitment to collective endeavour through thick and thin, and dare I say it, in sickness and tragedy, as well as in health. Although we all strive for efficiency in operation and in execution, and my wife Zoe will tell you that I myself do so to a fault, to be properly successful, it needs to be done with true and sensitive camaraderie. Despite the terrible shock FET was still recovering from by that time 2 years ago, the combination of human resilience and recovery were beginning once more to shine through. Equally, of course, humanity arguably finds its ultimate expression in the family, the basic building block of learning and expression in relationship, and a core location for the necessary give and take essential to any human community. This then gives me 3 of the 4 ways I want to describe FET today: sincerity, intent, and humanity. I want now to touch on another essential characteristic of any group that hopes to endure. I recently read a study about the essential evolution of an organisation beyond the time of its founder, who often has a charismatic and inspirational disposition. Such a leader bequeaths something of his or her own spirit, usually with a distinctive, attractive style. FET is fortunate to have had several stages of renewal in its leadership, taking that flame of essential continuity into a new era. But such continuity shouldn't merely echo and preserve the sounds and actions of the past, but must heed and respond to the contemporary circumstances, the signs of the times, if you like. FET has, time and again, exhibited what I would term an adaptable continuity. For instance, these days addressing things like smartphone exposure to children and polygender confusion that only a decade or two ago didn't feature at all. When hearing later on about some of our current research themes, and of course the presentations that our speakers are going to be giving, we will once again be only too aware of the many present-day threats to the family and its members, even if many are in fact mutations of age-old threats repackaged. To cite just one, I'm deeply revulsed at the attempt to invert the very notion of children's safeguarding, such that the act of safeguarding is now seen as the threat, rather than the plethora of sinister incursions that required the strengthening of safeguarding in the first place. Thus, we add a fourth trait that I claim afresh for FET today, adaptable continuity. I'd now like to take a moment to pay tribute to the many trustees who have carried the FET torch, some of them over a fair number of years. In particular, I'd like to mention Arthur Cornell, whom many will remember as FET's chair, James Eaton, FET's treasurer until recently, and also Gillian White, whom I hope is going to be here today, if she isn't already here. All three of those retired last year. But I'm equally happy, hugely relieved, you might say, that in the past 12 months we've appointed no fewer than 4 new trustees. Philip Crabtree, Sarah Hare, Ezra Kanyimo, and Tony Rosinski, between them bringing rich and broad experience to FET's trustee group. Under our current constitution, I commend them to you for election today in the rest of the AGM that will follow. Do take the opportunity later on to meet and get to know them, as well as to catch up with more familiar faces. I would, of course, also like to thank our director, Peter Williams, and Communications and Public Relations Officer, Lucy Marsh, who is around here, not only for putting this conference together, but also for the huge amount of work they've done this past year, both visible and behind the scenes. Together, they are the beating heart of our FET operation. This past year has indeed included a lot of background work, much of it now coming to the fore. There is a new website and a proposed new constitution, all foundational to our plans for the future, and Peter will talk more about them shortly as we go through the AGM and beyond. But as FET, our real value is the research that is the core of what we do. And so I'm particularly excited that today we are revealing some of that research that we have in progress, with much more in the pipeline. Alongside our high-quality research, we will always look at the most effective ways of reaching both the public and those of particular influence to ensure maximum impact. Today's article in the Daily Mail and the GB News appearance by Lucy earlier are just 2 examples of that. We're able to do this only with the deep generosity of so many over the years. Generous in time, in ideas and suggestions, in professional advice. And of course, generosity in providing the financial resources to build up a degree of resilience for bad times as well as good. In this season of fresh renewal for FET, we've been investing for the future. And in return for the fruits of this labour, we continue to depend on our supporters' contributions, whether off the cuff or regularly. For anyone wishing to make a one-off contribution today or to put in place something more regular, we can assist. And I'm sure we will appreciate the need is as great as ever. In fact, more so, I would argue, than ever. Which brings me to my last point before I finish. Our conference in 2023 was what turned out to be the last of a long series to take place at the RAF Club. Brought to an end because we were cancelled from that previously welcoming venue after a clearly vexatious complaint. It's not just we who are at risk of so-called cancellation. Some of you may be aware that a meeting of the Free Speech Union was summarily shut down on the South Coast just a few days ago. For us and for many other organisations who are fighting back, each in their own unique way, these threats are real and growing. FET's own unique contribution is, of course, its fact and empirically based research, and we will continue whatever the adversity thrown at us. Returning finally to where I started, likening FET to a clay pot that is sine cera, without wax. The family itself, it strikes me, is also a clay vessel with a treasure of its family members inside. Precious treasure, but vulnerable. This is the real reason we have chosen to be here today. We therefore take this opportunity here to renew our commitment to that treasure, which is the family, to pledge our deep and urgent support for the protection of the family with sincerity, intent, humanity, and adaptive continuity. Thank you very much.